This time, Genoa, Italy's first great champions, and Swindon upset the odds for League Cup triumph.
And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more. 'Cause I'll stay a while over forever and more. And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more. 'Cause I'll stay a while over forever and more.
Hello and welcome to By Far the Greatest Team, a podcast in which football fans try and attempt the impossible to work out who is the greatest football team of all time. My name's Graham Dunn. I'm an Oxford fan, and I am somehow coming to terms with some of the content we have coming up on this pod. And joining me as ever is our data hero. It's Jamie Rooney.
Not the all heroes wear capes as well. What a combination, Swindon Town and Genoa. And Swindon Town, as we're going to find out over the next hour, have quite a history with Italian football teams. There is a link. So it may feel a bit of a weird coincidence that we've got Genoa and Swindon in a single pod episode, but there are associated links.
There are indeed. And Genoa are interesting. It seems, on the one hand, they're a strange team to pick, but in fact, they fit into a bit of a pattern. So Genoa are part of something called the Club of Pioneers, which isn't an overpriced ticketing arrangement at Wembley or at the Manchester City's Tunnel Club or whatever it is. What are the Club of Pioneers, Jamie?
It's a network of football clubs that are the oldest continuing clubs, the first of their type in each country. So there's a club of around about 30 odd football teams. And what's brilliant, Graham, is that Genoa aren't the first that we've covered in this series. We've actually covered 4 Club of Pioneer football teams already. I'd love to say that we were strategic, but I feel it's coincidence. But maybe we're just, a couple of like-minded guys sharing the same themes of the Club of Pioneers in terms of these teams of greatness.
Picking our way through them. So one of them obviously must be Sheffield FC, the founding English football league team, still going not as a league team in anything, but still kicking away in the minor leagues in Sheffield. Jamie, who are the other 3?
So you're right. We covered Sheffield in our very first episode in season 1, and then in our second episode of season 1, we went on to Scotland's oldest football team, and that's Queen's Park. Also still kicking around now, the very famous Queen's Park. And then later on in Series 1, we had incredible success. I know probably Jamie Orson likes to think it was down to his brilliant Portsmouth team in terms of the popularity of this episode. But we did Mohan Bagan, that brilliant story from 1911 when the locals whipped the English oppressors.
Definitely so. We're India's finest. The last one we've done is more recent, isn't it?
Oh, we had the wonderful Mark Griffith on talking everything. The A to Z of Wrexham AFC, Wales's oldest football club continuing to play today. And it was a absolutely barnstorming episode with the wonderful Mark.
It certainly was. Now, mentioning there both of Mark, which obviously we were talking about Scotland last week, 78 side, and their qualifier against Wales, which Mark had mentioned his horror at the games being switched away from the racecourse ground. Key qualifier, of course, was played at Anfield. And that was last week's pod that we had, and on that we had Stefan Shaw, who, as part of his research, whether deliberately or not, actually about 3 weeks ago went to the Partick Thistle Queen's Park game. So there you go. That is a kind of genuine research in there. Now, it was a great pod. A lot of fun on that one. What I had probably underestimated in all of this, which probably we should have mentioned, is talking about how good that Scotland team were and subsequent Scotland teams, it actually passed me by quite how good the current Scotland team is.
They are smashing it. They are top of their group in qualification towards Germany in the Euros 2024 next summer. They've won 5 games out of 5. A group that includes Spain, no pushover, no mugs. A group that includes Norway with probably one of the greatest football players, probably most definitely the greatest striker in current football at the moment, Erling Haaland. And yes, Scotland have won 5 out of 5, and I think they have only chipped in 1 goal, having scored 15. So yeah, this is a really brilliantly improving Scotland, and I'm super excited that there's a very strong possibility we're going to see them in the Euros for the 2nd consecutive time next summer.
Appreciation of how good that Scotland team was probably a key thing missing from our pod from last week. You can, of course, listen to any of these pods via the website or go through the podcast. You can really see all the previous episodes that we have done. And, of course, a quick reminder to subscribe to the podcast to get it every Thursday, a new one in your lining up, ready in your podcast, however you get it, whether it be Spotify. I don't need to go through them all. We have them out every Thursday, so please subscribe to that. But without any more ado, I think we should get into our pods teams today, and let's kick it off with Genoa. So we go again, and this time we're looking at one of the classic old team stories, and a real kind of one of the pioneers of football. And it's a team which actually has, it's an Italian team, but an Italian team that actually has quite a British and English influence to it. So we are talking about Genoa. Jamie, why is this team so special?
This is a special team because it goes back to the early stages and the beginnings of football in Italy. And absolutely, there's a massively strong British influence on this particular team. In fact, the name Genoa is English. That's the English pronunciation of Genova, which if you're in Italy and you see inside and you're in the Liguria region, you will see signposts for Genova, which is the Italian pronunciation. But Genoa, the football team, have maintained their Englishness through the pronunciation and through the dark days of fascism, when there was a lot of pressure for them to change their name as well. And they also have the St. George's cross on their badge as well. So and it all goes back to the origins of football in Italy.
Is football beginning kind of simultaneously across the different and starting to you're starting to see more organised teams at the same time, or are there kind of influences coming from England?
Completely English influence. So this is football in Italy began in the late 1890s. The British Empire was in flow. There were ship lanes over the Mediterranean that went down to the Suez Canal to get to India. So the trade routes in terms of for the maritime transits was set. And Genoa was a thriving port in the late 1800s. And Italy was a fairly new country. So Italy as a nation was only formed in 1871. Before that, it was disparate. It was, there was a lot of separation, different regions, different languages. So Italy as a nation had only just come together in 1871. And you got this port of Genoa where you've got ships rolling in, rolling out, exports, imports. So it creates opportunities. A new country, new opportunities, people quite naturally looking to better their lives, potentially travel to Italy. And when the British Empire travel, as we've talked about many times before, they take their customs with them. And football and cricket were taken into Italy, and a lot of football and cricket teams were being set up, most notably by a gentleman called Eduardo Dorsio, an Italian guy who was spending a bit of time in Nottingham, England, working in a textiles factory in Nottingham. A bit of a rower, but noticed and could see that there was a lot of football going on in that particular period, which would have been around about the 1880s, 1890s. So he took this back to Italy and he set up the very first football team in Italy called Turin Football and Cricket Club.
Cricket Club. So was the cricket being played?
Yeah, cricket was more popular than football for the first 10, 15, 20 years in Italy. Genoa, the team we're talking about, and we'll get to the 2014, the 1914. But to kind of set the context, Genoa is called Genoa CFC, which stands for Genoa Cricket and Football Club. Milan also was set up as a cricket club. So it was quite common practice in the three big cities, Turin and Milan, the big cities in the north of Italy, and Genoa on the coast, the big port. They were the cities that established football. So when Edward Bosio set up the Turin Football and Cricket Club, he needed someone to play. So he was encouraging people in Turin to set up other football clubs, and Genoa followed by a gentleman called James Richardson Spenceley, was responsible, an English guy, an English doctor who had gone to Genoa to better his life. He was a medic. He was working with the coal ships that were rolling into Genoa, and he'd gone to Italy to look for work. And out of that work, he had his passion football, massive football lover, loved football, got connected with the Genoa Cricket and Football Club, and was able then to participate as a player, and then would later go on and become a manager.
So he's playing right at the outset. And this Genoa side, did they win the first tournament? Is that right? Or the first league?
Yeah, so the league system in Italy, as we know it as Serie A, that didn't actually begin in earnest until 1929. So 1929 was the birth of Serie A. Before that, it was mostly regional stuff. So in the early days of football, the first league game was actually played in 1898, and it was organised between Genoa and FC Torinese, and Spenceley, who had got involved with Genoa. He was the ringleader. He got things organised through his passion of football. So Genoa, previously, they had a rule where no Italians could play. So you've got a football club in Italy called Genoa, and Italians aren't welcome. It was a British run football team. It was British consulates that made up the playing staff.
It's not like there's any heritage of the Italian footballers go on to show any heritage of playing football at all. What a disastrous decision.
I mean, this guy was really interested, and when he got established in Genoa, he changed that rule. So he welcomed all. So Italians were welcome; they could play. They then played the very first football match very first competitive football match, I should say, in 1898. And straight after that, the Italian Football Federation was formed, and the first league started in that summer. And it was played over a day. It was only 4 teams, and Genoa were the victors. They won the very first Italian championship as it was organised.
They are at the origins of it. They are, and in fact, they go within that slightly less structured period. They're a pretty dominant force, aren't they? Over that first sort of 30 years or so, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. The dominance is there as the league structure is changing. So more and more teams are being introduced, but obviously football is new to these teams, and Genoa are able to dominate through that period, and they win 5 of the first 6 what's called the Campionato Italiano di Football, so the championship of Italian football, mostly for northern teams. There is a big divide in Italy, north and south, politically and through football. And this divide was exclusively, the football at the beginnings of the time was exclusively for teams in the north, but then that would grow. And then suddenly you would have a different league system called the Prima Categoria, where it then started to welcome teams from the south. But the way that Italian football structured itself was that you would have a North Division and a South Division, and the winners of the North Division would play the winners of the South Division to decide who were the national champions.
The first James Richardson, before the James Richardson that was to have even more influence on Italian football to people of a certain age. James Richardson Spencer, he is a fascinating character, isn't he? So he begins his football career out on pitch and then changes up, doesn't he?
He goes in goal. He plays in goal. He actually doesn't really start playing football until he's 30 years old. So when he arrives in Italy, he's 29, 30, and he gets to football straight away. So he moves backwards from the defensive line to the very back line in goal.
Which is quite an impressive way of prolonging your career. I wondered whether Phil Jagielka was ever tempted to just eke that career out a bit longer after that penalty save. It's
unique. You can't think of many examples beyond this one where an outfield player has decided to become a goalkeeper to prolong his career.
And he plays on for through, I think, till 1906, doesn't he? And then even once that retires from that, he stays. He's involved in the management of the club afterwards, isn't he?
Yeah, he plays till he's 40, then he becomes a manager. And obviously, we're talking about the setup here right now with the team we are supposed to be moving on to, the 22-24 team. But he is an interesting character, and he's so integral, not just to Genoa, but to Italian football, along with Eduardo Bossio and another guy who we'll talk about another day called Herbert Kilpin, who's a really interesting character. Films were made of him. He's got close ties to Milan, so maybe when we talk about a Milan team from this particular period, we can then delve into the life and times of Herbert Kilpin. But James Richardson Spenceley is a fascinating individual. Spoke many languages, did a bit of boxing, was a journalist on the side. He was a doctor by trade. He was a football player outfield. He was a goalkeeper. He was a polyglot. He was a scouting enthusiast. He's friends with the scouting guy. What was it? Baden Powell, I think.
Baden Powell, yeah.
My scouting days are kind of long behind me. Yeah, he was just a really interesting guy. But unfortunately, his time was cut short. He was a medic in the First World War. He was wounded on the field of battle, attending an enemy soldier, taken to a German hospital, and unfortunately never returned from that. So by 48, his interest in An Amazing Life is over, but he's already kind of set the wheels in motion to establish this particular team, Genoa, who we're going to talk about from the 1920s after the First World War, when another individual, another British guy, gets involved with the team and then moves Genoa onto this double championship team that we probably should get on talking about.
That's William Garbutt, isn't it?
That is William Garbutt, yeah, from the north of England. He's credited in Italian football as being the model that what managers became in Italy. Close friends with Vittorio Pozzo, the Italian manager who won 2 World Cups with Italy in the 1930s. So William Garbutt was ahead of his time. He organised players, he organised training regimes, he applied tactics, he organised salaries for players. So you're going into the professional game here. He also was responsible, I think, for the first paid transfer of a player. So William Garbutt, who took over the reins at 29 years old, a bit of a Brian Clough story. Injury cut his career short, went into coaching, went to Genoa at 1912. The war paused his career. Then he came back afterwards, and then he would go on with a new Italian league and set up with many more teams, would go on and would win 3 titles with Genoa.
Yes, and so that side, that's really the origins of the Italian league as we know it today, in terms of a far richer number of teams competing, much more of a league structure, and so that Genoa side is really the first major Italian football club, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. So they win 5 of the first 6 championships, and as the other teams are growing. There's another team that we will talk about at another point called Pro Vercelli, who people probably won't know too much about, but they were a dominating team as well in that period. So Genoa would have been competing with Pro Vercelli, and then they would also be competing with a Bologna team, which was really good. And then the old lady, which would have been a young lady, then Juve and Internazionale and Milan were starting to shape and become the teams that we know of today. But Genoa with the big boys, they were the big team.
And so they win several championships in the end, and their most recent one, they win one in 1923-24, the last one in that little run of success, and in fact the last one for 99 years. Would that be right?
Yeah, 23-24, there's their 9th title, their 2nd in concession. And in Italy, you've probably seen it, where Italian clubs will show a star on their shirt. Juventus have 3, Milan have 2, Inter Milan have 2, and they have it as a recognition of winning 10 championships. So Genoa have been waiting for their star, their only star, for almost 100 years since their last championship.
It does feel as though it's set up for this season. They're promoted again at the end of last year. They've got new investors, 777 Partners invested. Yeah, maybe this is the 100-year romantic story.
It would be wonderful, and we saw with Napoli last year winning their third ever Scudetto. We should talk about the Scudetto as well in a minute, and what that is a wonderful romantic story. And maybe there are opportunities in Italian football now for teams to come through. And Genoa definitely have the established authority. And you mentioned they are a pioneer. They actually belong to a group of teams called the Club of Pioneers. You can find them on social media, and it's teams the oldest teams that have. In the football world that are still playing games today, and it's spread right throughout the world. And it's a really interesting social account to follow because there's some fascinating teams in that. And Genoa are a member. So, yeah, there are opportunities. It would be a beautiful story if Genoa could go on and, from their promotion from Serie B, win Serie A this year. But I think it's highly unlikely. I think the sweet thing for them is that they actually replaced Sampdoria, who have gone down to Serie B. So I think they may enjoy that.
So, I mean, is it clear why Genoa kind of faded away from that glorious start? What kind of happened to that team?
That's a good question, actually. I think it's just establishment in terms of bigger teams. The big teams started to kind of really come into their own. There's another team that we'll talk about. We've kind of loosely mentioned a few times, Torino, not to be confused with the Turin Football and Cricket Club, completely different team. The Gran Torino. Torino were a major force in the 30s and 40s, so they kind of replaced it. Bologna also came in as a force, and slowly but surely in the background, Juve really started to establish themselves as the biggest and best football team in Italy. Juve, Latin for youths, I think.
Oh, good knowledge. Very impressive. After that opening period, I suppose it has been a pretty mixed century of football for Genoa.
It has, but the reason we're focused on the team from 22 to 24 is because they did win 2 championships, and they won 2 championships at a time where the championship had actually taken some structure. It predates the Serie A, the national leagues, but they were really big competitions. So in the North Division, Genoa would have been competing with 36 affiliated league teams, or 48 in one particular season, across 3 divisions. So the teams would have 2 or 3 divisions depending on the season. So the teams would have been split into teams of 16, and Genoa were very competitive in the first of the 2 championships. They won their group very comfortably, didn't lose a game, won 17 games, scored 61 goals, only conceded 18 goals in a 30 league season, which is pretty impressive. And they beat their nearest rival by 7 points when it's 2 points for a win. They then went on to a final round where they played Pro Vercelli, who were the defending champions at that particular point. And it was a very tight contest, but they did beat them. They overcome them, and then they played the team from the south, who were the champions at that particular moment, was Lazio. The south, at this particular moment, I mean, you could probably argue for the whole of Italian history, albeit last season aside, that the south has always been subservient to the north teams in Italy. It just seems the way it is. But they dispatched Lazio quite easily, 6-1 over 2 games. The following season, they lose a couple of games in the group, but they win the group comfortably. They then beat a very good Bologna team in the playoff, in the northern playoff, and then they go on and beat Schiavio in the south and versus north national final quite comfortably again. And so they've won 2 championships, the 8th and 9th. They are also, and this is where really kind of we get into the roots of Italian history, they are the first football team to win the Scudetto. So the Scudetto isn't necessarily the champions of Serie A, it's the champions of Italy. And the Scudetto means little shield, Graham, I'm sure you knew that. And it's the Italian flag, the tricolour, and it enables the champions the right to wear the tricolour, the shield, the little shield, on their shirts. So that's why when we see Italian teams with the tricolour on their shirts, the Italian flag, it's a symbol that they've won the Scudetto. So it's very commonplace to see this on the shirts of AC Milan, Inter Milan, Juve, Bologna, Napoli. All these teams have the Italian shield.
Now, Garbutt is an interesting chap, and does go on to have an interesting career. After his spell at Genoa, he then heads to Roma and then Napoli with various levels of success for both of them, and then off to off to Atletico Bilbao in Spain, where he wins La Liga. I mean, it's a bizarre sort of career for a kind of an English docker, I think he was, wasn't he? To sort of to turn up and make this highly successful managerial career across formative Italian and Spanish football sides.
I like to see him in the image that he was an opportunist, that he was following his passion. He clearly had to find work to live, and his passion was football, and he was able to convert his passion into work and follow that around. And he is a fascinating character, and in Italy he's held in the highest regard. I mean, in England we probably don't know much around who William Garbutt is. He's not a common name when we talk about the greats of football history. But in Italian football history, he is well regarded, and he is somebody that is kind of seen as the first person that was actually able to put the coaching philosophy into the game of football, where you apply different things other than just picking 11 players. You apply tactics, you apply training regimes, you look at ways of how you can beat your opponent. And yeah, I mean, he kind of had a troubling time as well. If you read his story, he had a troubling time through the Second World War. He kind of sympathized with Mussolini, and Genoa themselves were fighting fascism in the 1920s. So all of this is going on in Italy. In 1920, Mussolini has done his march into Rome. He's taken control of the country. He's taken his shirt off quite a lot to kind of show that he's a very masculine, strong man. I think there's a few other leaders these days that like to take their shirt off to show their strength as well. So Mussolini was the forefather on that one. And this is all going on while Italian football is growing. And Mussolini's influence should be understated in terms of football, because football wasn't the biggest sport in Italy going into the 1920s. It was a very popular sport and it was growing. And through this opportunity of growth, Mussolini was able to convert it into the national game. And he was able to tap into, personally, but through his dictatorship, they were able to tap into the idea of calcio. So in Italy, football is known up and down the country as calcio, which doesn't literally translate into football. It really dates back to the Renaissance, when the Italians would have laid claim to inventing football. They had their own form of football. It's like a 27-a-side contest with 3 goalkeepers and 6 referees. And there were no real rules. It's a bit similar to how football started probably in England, where you'd have one village fight another village with thousands of people trying to wrestle some kind of ball-shaped thing from one place to another. Calcio was organized in this image. It was quite similar to that, where you'd have formations of 9-9-9. Pretty good formation, yeah, especially if you need to call somebody in an emergency. And Mussolini just capitalized on the opportunities to turn football into the national sport, because he could see that there were synergies between what he was trying to do in terms of radicalize the country and where football was in terms of the popularity.
There's quite a depth of history and story to this. Where does Genoa fit in the hierarchy of greatness, Jamie? How great are they?
Well, I mean, this particular Genoa team I'm struggling. I mean, even when you look at some of the previous players, sometimes we're able to get some nuggets on players, and there's a history. It was kind of locally based players. I think Renzo De Vecchi was one of the more famous one. He went to the Olympics. Eduardo Cato scored a lot of goals. And then you got Ottavio Barberi, who is kind of seen as one of the best players of all time. And when you look at the Hall of Fame for Genoa, but I don't think this particular Genoa team is any greater than an edge of greatness, or probably even blinkered greatness, to be honest. I could easily be swayed on that. I think Genoa as a football team are really important to not just Italian football, to football in general. And I think it's really important to understand and share the links between the origins of the game and how it established in Italy to what it's become now is quite easily a national obsession in Italy. You know, the things that the Italians talk about the most is politics and football. Generally, they're the two obsessions, and it all started with a couple of guys that were influenced by what they saw in Britain, and Genoa were right at the very front and start of that movement. So I think I've talked myself into, I think they're blinkered greats.
It is difficult to really grab hold of of the characters behind this team beyond the original James Richardson and William Garbutt, both of whom have some incredible legacy attached to them. I think I'm almost torn. I think it's probably harsh to go. I'm almost tempted to go for them in the not great, but without them we wouldn't be where we are today, because legacy is definitely their biggest thing is legacy. They're right at the heart of it. But I think that's probably they did win. And they didn't just win one league. They were dominant for a period of time. They were dominant. Obviously, that period we're particularly looking at, the post First World War period. But actually, they were dominant for the first 20, 30 years of Italian football in one form or another. So, whilst I think it's their legacy that is the main bit of it, it feels like it underplays them a little bit. I think I might be tempted with Edge of Greatness for them. Blink of Greatness feels. I mean, they were a successful side, weren't they?
They were, yeah. You could talk me back into Edge of Greatness quite comfortably, Graham.
It's still in its emerging stage, so I think it is difficult to argue beyond that. But I like Edge of Greatness for them. I think we're going to say Genoa, 1922, 24, 23, 23, 24 side in particular. Edge of Greatness. I don't really know how this has happened because, I mean, Jamie, when you suggested we did a team that was nestled in the countryside somewhere between the M4 and M40, who gloriously won the League Cup as the only proper domestic cup they've ever won in their history, and were cruelly denied a place in Europe, I was obviously dusting down my Trevor Hebbert and John Aldridge fact. And it turns out we're not going back to 1986 and the glorious Oxford United Milk Cup winning side. We're going back to 1969, and you say it.
Yes, we are going to talk about Swindon Town, the first
Swindon
team in the Lower Midlands. How would you classify it? I don't know how you would call it. That area.
Well, obviously I have some words. As to how I would classify it, but yes. So arch nemesis, Swindon Town. But I do have to concede, it is an extraordinary story, this side from 1969. So they, it's a pretty staggering cup win in the League Cup, which sort of comes from nowhere, doesn't it?
Well, it's a giant killing in the League Cup, and giant killings don't get the profile that the FA Cup seems to give. We celebrate the English FA Cup and the giant killings of the past, and we reel out all of the great giant killings every time the third round of the FA Cup comes along, hoping we'll have another one. But the League Cup, albeit is a lesser of a priority for many teams, has produced some pretty amazing giant killings in its time, and this is probably one of the greatest of all time. Third division, third tier, as we like to call it.
Mm-hmm. Swindon
Town beating the mighty Arsenal, Bertie Meesartle, who would go on in 2 years' time and win the double, 3-1 on a very dodgy pitch at Wembley.
Yes, the footage is fantastic, and we'll come on to that in a moment. Arsenal, as you say, pretty well heralded. I think they'd lost in the cup final the season before, but a side that's coming together with the likes of Frank McClintock and George Graham and various other stars who go on to play in that double winning side. And it's slightly different structure to that tournament, isn't there? The top tier sides get a bye to the opening round, and Swindon as a League One side have to battle their way through multiple rounds and multiple replays, in fact. Without knocking anyone stellar out along the way, I would probably argue it's a decent cup run, isn't it?
Including the final, Swindon Town played 12 games in the cup run, which includes a two-legged semi-final against Burnley, Division 1, top tier Burnley at that particular point, and that finishes on a tie, so they have to go to a replay in the semi-final just to add to the volume of games they're playing. Yeah, it's a staggering, I think it's 1,000 and something minutes that they actually play in that Cup run. It's I think it's still to this day is the most games played by a team in a League Cup run.
So as you say, they end up with a replay in almost every round, but that replay for the the cup semi-final does. A two-legged cup semi-final going to a replay does seem bizarre now, doesn't it?
It does, but no more bizarre than the crazy rule where away goals counted in extra time in the second leg of a two-legged game. But it's an incredible run, and they play some tidy teams along the way. They face Brian Clough's Derby County, who are on a flyer in the second tier. That they will end up getting promoted into the top tier in that particular season. Just going back though, you're right when you point out the League Cup and having its structure in play, because it's not like the FA Cup. It's not like it's open to hundreds of teams from the lower leagues that can have their shot at glory. It's limited to the league teams. So the 92 teams has generally always been. It would have been 92 when the League Cup first came into existence in the early 1960s. But the big boys, the big clubs at the time, whether they were playing European football or whether they just didn't want the overhead, didn't participate. And this continued right through to around the late 1960s, 70s. I think even in the 1968-69 edition that we're talking about now, one team didn't participate, 91 teams participated, and the one team that was excluded through choice was Manchester United. So the League Cup has a bit of a kind of a trip in trying to get itself a bit taken seriously. And the reason why we got the League Cup as well is fantastic. It's the birth of floodlights. It's the birth of European football and floodlights, midweek football.
Mm-hmm.
So an opportunity to bring in a second cup competition to play under the lights in midweek was used as one of the reasons why the League Cup came into its existence.
And so Arsenal, as seemed to happen a bizarre amount of times in their history, and played Spurs in the cup semi-final. They also knocked out Liverpool earlier on the way through. They set up this cup final, which is, probably as one-sided a game as you are expecting there to be beforehand. Arsenal, highly impressive, top-tier side. Swindon, who are, in fairness, are going well in the third tier, aren't they? They're having a good season. They do end up getting promoted that year. So they are a formed team. They go into that game as massive underdogs, and that side is made up of quite an unheralded, in terms of their careers outside of Swindon, quite an unheralded set of players. I mean, it is staggering to look at actually how many games they had all played for Swindon, and we'll come on to one player in particular, but that whole team has played, they all end up playing 200 plus games for Swindon out of that starting 11. So it's not as though very many of them then go on to, they don't have a star player who goes on to much greater things later on in their career or has come from previous. It is a pretty unheralded team outside of Swindon, isn't it?
It is. Danny Williams was the manager at the time, and when he took over in the mid-1960s, there was a few players that Mike Summerby famously moved on, but he inherited a bubbling youth team. So there were a bunch of youngsters that were coming through the ranks, and he was able, through the finances that Swindon had, but also through his savvy, he was able to shape these players that were coming through the team. And yeah, you're right, the appearances are crazy, and I'm pretty much certain you're going to talk about the same one I'm thinking about when it comes to appearances.
John Trollope, was quite sort of renowned for being the player who's played the most number of games in the English Football League. Oh, then I was starting to think, I wonder if John Trollope was in that side in 1967, and 69, sorry, isn't it?
69, yeah.
And not only is he in that team, he has already played. I mean, there's actually a sort of a backstory to it, but he has played the previous 7 seasons. He's been an ever-present. So he's played 368 games in a row. He had played. And it's only in that season that run comes to an end. When he gets a broken arm, he plays first game in the cup run and is back in time for the cup final. Which if you play for Swindon Town for 20 years, you probably deserve to play in that game. So that does feel like there's some justice in there.
Absolutely. Yeah, his run is incredible. 7 seasons without, I mean, these are starts, because obviously this is the days where you only had even no substitutions in the first part of when he started that run. And then it kind of went into one substitution towards the end of his run. 368 games. I don't know about you, Graham, but I struggle to find any statistics on this, on lower league players. You can quite easily find these incredible consecutive runs. In Inacio Williams in La Liga quite recently has broken the Liga record for consecutive games. But the only one I could find was Phil Neal from Liverpool, who, and it's kind of contradictory information as well. He played 366 consecutive league matches, which obviously is too short than John Trollope. But other sources tell me that Phil Neal played 417 games in a row, which would make him, I think, quite easily the longest running consecutive run of an individual player unbroken, which is quite incredible. But John Trollope's record is remarkable. Playing on those pitches in that era when the game was incredibly physical, as a defender, it's quite incredible.
And in fact, I was sort of disappointed because actually his goal return, because I was wondering about this, a left back, you might expect left backs perhaps to score more regularly these days, maybe. I like the idea that maybe, because I can imagine if you were a defender and you played all those seasons in a row, I can imagine, he must have had like a fantastic run of games scoring as well. But he's pretty solid and reliable in his goal return as well. There aren't many seasons he doesn't notch at least one, and I think there's one season he gets 4, but everything else is sort of in between 1, 2, and 3. So they're absolutely solid. Remarkably solid and consistent. I also like that he retired in 1979 and he joins the coaching staff, and he's still retired the next year, and then comes back. They're doing so badly, I think this has happened to many teams. Definitely happened to Oxford before, where he's struggling so much you have to bring out the club legend in some way at the back, past retirement in some way, and he comes back and plays 14 more games, tips over the record, and so I think it's 770 games all in the league and 889 in total. Extraordinary achievement. In amongst all of that, he gets a League Cup-winners medal.
Well, he gets the League Cup-winners medal, but we really should classify this Swindon Town as double winners, because obviously they go on and they capture the first ever Anglo-Italian League Cup as well, which then triggers the birth of that competition, which Swindon go on and win again the following season. So we're not just talking about a League Cup in incredible circumstances. They get this incredible double as well.
I mean, I'll sort of let you have it. I might sort of claim the Oxford United Soccer Sixes of 1986-87 if we're going to claim that as a proper tournament. I mean, I don't know, but yes, no, but there's definitely an interesting. There is a story to come onto on how come they were in that tournament then.
So when Swindon won the League Cup, when they beat Arsenal, we really should talk about the final in a bit as well, because there were some things in there.
Yes, okay. Well, let's come on to it, because I'm getting my dates confused. So did they win it in the same year?
Yeah, they won the League Cup in the March of '69. They won the first Anglo-Italian League Cup, as it was called, in the summer of that year. And then the following year, they then went on and won what became the Anglo-Italian Cup, which was the extended version. But the details of that we can probably cover in a bit.
So the game itself, the Arsenal game, and I think this is, so there's several factors that go into making this maybe not the most straightforward of games for Arsenal, who are a very good side. They are impacted by a flu bug quite badly, which certainly the players were laying as the reason, particularly why they were struggling in extra time. So the flu bug does definitely have an impact, and it's probably fair to say. So this game was played in March, and it's at Wembley. The finals I think this was the third final at Wembley, wasn't it? They just started.
Yeah,
they've gone from a 2-legged final to playing at Wembley. And Wembley in March, on this instance, it was a pretty dodgy pitch, wasn't it?
It's a bog. It's a quagmire. What a word quagmire is. You don't get to use that very often, but when you do, it generally is used in footballing parlance as the pitch is what we would probably classify as unplayable these days. although pitches would never be in this state. I mean, it really is. It literally was a horse field, because Horse of the Year show, which is a very quintessential British thing. For anyone who's listening outside the UK, I apologise that there was this thing every year. I think it still goes on, where there's this Horse of the Year show. And it was held on Wembley Stadium. And so the pitch was cut up through horses doing their thing, prancing around. It was a bog, and it was kind of weighted as the great leveler. I think we've played Sunday football, and we've been in those changing rooms where the pitch is so bad. Our confident captain, who doesn't fancy our chances on a nice lush pitch, has seen the pitch outside and said, "This is the leveler. This will level us. It doesn't matter. They're better than us." And I think that's what Swindon had. They had an advantage. I think also, just on that, I mean, the flu epidemic is a factor. I think we shouldn't run away from the fact that this Swindon team were incredibly fit. Danny Williams, the coach, really focused on fitness, and that, whilst Arsenal will cite that the flu had caught up with them in the extra time where Don Rogers gets his goals, the Swindon team were exceptionally fit as well, and that shouldn't be overlooked.
The other quirk of this game is both teams playing their away kits as well, for reasons which are a bit...
Absolutely fantastic.
So Swindon in white and Arsenal...
the classic.
The classic, yes, yeah. It is great. You can watch, and we will put it in the up on the social. You can see some footage from this game. It's back in the footage I found is back in from the Pate News era. I don't know if you managed to find anything separate from that. They are falling about all over the place. And the first goal, Bob Wilson's in goal for Arsenal at this stage, and he is. There's a mix up in the heart of the Arsenal defence penalty box. Bob Wilson totally slips, falls on the floor, and I think it's Smart, isn't it? I can't remember his first name. Smart scores the opening goal for Swindon, and having gone one up, it is a bit of a rear guard performance, isn't it?
It really is. They fall into a formation I don't think we've ever seen before, and probably won't never see again. It's almost a 8-2-0 or 7-2-1 at best formation. It's a very, very strong backline, and it's inviting the pressure. But behind that backline, they've got a goalkeeper in Peter Downsborough, who's having the game of his life. And I think even when Arsenal were able to break through that incredibly strong defensive line, they've got this keeper who's just in the moment of his life and obviously doing everything he can to help his team win and make history being a lower tier team.
Once you put bodies behind the ball, and obviously it's difficult for Arsenal then to try and play their way through the Swindon defence at that stage. But I mean, you are talking about, even making allowances for the pitch. This is still Wembley. It's a big old surface. To be able to hold out two division, this isn't being done on. I mean, it is a bog of a pitch, but it isn't being done on a ropey non-league ground in where the play. This is a Wembley, so it is. It's quite an achievement, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not Edgar Park, and that's for sure. It is an achievement. It's a massive achievement. And I think, again, it goes down to the fitness of the Swindon Town players and the fact that they've prepared for this in a way that they know it's a one-off. It's an opportunity to create history. And it's a fantastic result. And when you read the reports afterwards, there's little complaints from the Arsenal team. Some of the players did cite, Frank McClintock did cite that, the flu epidemic that happened to Arsenal in the run-up to the final was a factor, but they still accepted that on the day Swindon Town did everything they possibly could to deserve their victory, deserve their League Cup triumph.
You'd expect the classic cup shot to be they go one up and then the keeper has a worldie, but actually, no, Arsenal do equalise. They, the more predictable, the more regular thing happens, which is, 5 minutes from the end, it's Bobby Gould, I think, isn't it, who gets the equaliser for Arsenal. So the dreams have been shattered. That is usually the cue for the dream to end at 1-1 and then going to extra time. And amazing, actually, that seems, while Swindon have been lining up and defending again in the rest of the game, things sort of switch around in that extra time period.
Yeah, it does. And it's good fortune for Peter Downsbury, who talked about the goalkeeper, because he is having this incredible game, but then he makes this one mistake where he kind of gets caught coming out, and in no man's land, you can see the black and white footage. And Bobby Gould, the great Bobby Gould of Wimbledon fame, pulls back the goal for Arsenal. And you're right, Graham. At that particular point, you're just conditioned that this is where the big team goes on and wins it next time, and the dream is over. But the absolute reverse happens. Arsenal fall into themselves. They look tired from the footage that we've seen on YouTube. But then on that pitch, I think you're going to be gasping for air anyway, and your legs are going to be heavy. But it probably comes down to the belief in Swindon that they had for that day and their fitness. They unbelievably take the lead 2-1.
Which is Don Rogers, who is the big legend of Swindon, one of their top all-time goal scorers. I mean, I do enjoy it. I was watching the Pathé News. The goal that puts them 2-1 up comes from a corner, and then it's bobbling about in the box, and there's a load of ricochets and air shots, and then the ball comes to Don Rogers, about 4 yards out of goal, and he puts it in. Described as a great goal from Rogers, a great goal. The most generous definition of a great, significant, yes. Great. I'm not sure I'm having that, but the 4-yard tap in. And then they hold out, and actually Don Rogers gets a second one on the break. I think by that stage, from what I can tell, it has become probably a bit of a basketball game in terms of Arsenal chucking everyone forward. There's not much on the footage I've seen. There's not a lot of clue as to what's happened, but there's basically only Bob Wilson and Don Rogers in the entire half, from what I can see. So and he takes that goal well. Curiously, I haven't. There's no footage of this in that. I did read a report that suggested that club legend John Trollope had he had a shot that was going in, only to hit the referee on the way and then go out for a corner instead. I'm not sure how that could be a corner. I don't know if the ref just unilaterally decided it's a corner, or but I haven't been able to independently verify this. I've been able to see the footage, and it's kind of not shown. But John Trollope could have been a goal scorer as well.
He could have, and he could have been added to his 2 or 3 a season that he reliably gets. Just going back to the Don Rogers third goal, you're right. It has gone kind of like a basketball game at that particular point, from what it tells, from what you can see. But there's a good 40, 50 metres that Don Rogers has to cover on that pitch late in the game, 120 minutes almost, to face Bob Wilson. And I kind of think a lot of players nowadays would just take the time. They would run the ball to the corner flag. I don't think they would have the ambition to think, I'll go for this. And he doesn't. He's covering that ground on that pitch at that particular time. There's a lot of thinking to be done for the striker at that point in terms of like decision making. Instinct will come into it, but you're still left with your thoughts as you're carrying that ball. So I think he does really well. And I was kind of almost painting a picture in my head because you mentioned about the Pathé News, and I haven't seen the Pathé News footage of this one. I'm going to have to go back and watch it, because at this point, Pathé News would have definitely come with sound, and it was that kind of classic English plumness going on. So in my head, I was thinking, here's Rogers. He's got some ground cover on this boggy pitch, smashes it away, up the top. It's that kind of like commentary you get from Pathé News. It's all very upbeat. Even for his tapping, I think they would have probably, upbeat the gloriousness of that.
And Bob Wilson was a very established goalkeeper by then, obviously continuing our cup theme of BBC TV presenter goalkeepers, following in the footsteps of David Icke. But it's a great, incredible win, just an unbelievable achievement. I think one of the things that is very impressive about what they go and do, I mean, you think about it in that very same competition, Birmingham did the same against Arsenal in 10, 15 years or so ago, wasn't it? And get an unlikely win against the odds, and then go ahead and lose just about every game for the rest of the... Because it's at such a weird time, because you still have, another 6 to 8 weeks to play, well, probably more than that, of the season to go. You have to then go and get yourself and summon yourself up again. And fair play to that Swindon side, because they do go ahead and... I think they win promotion that year, don't they?
They do win promotion. And I think, again, I'm going to refer back to the coach, Danny Williams. A really well-known character. Shortly after winning the League Cup with Swindon, he was replaced. He seemed like he was a savvy coach, because I've read quotes that once they were into the final, once they'd beaten Burnley, and the game was in December, he then just focused the players on the league. It's like, this is what we're playing for now. Forget the final. We now need to focus on the league. And I would have liked to, if I'm reading that in the right way, after the final, he reinforced the same message, because you've seen over the last 20 years, teams that win the League Cup, suddenly their form just absolutely no, unless you're Manchester City and you just go on and win everything. But generally, you see this kind of consistent theme when the League Cup has been won. Or maybe I'm just thinking about Tottenham, I don't know. But their form does seem to kind of like drop in the opposite direction to winning a trophy. But Swindon, yeah, they went on, they got promotion, and they got promotion from League 3 in a time when only 2 teams went up. 2 teams went up, 2 teams went down. So we didn't have the classic 3 teams up, 3 teams down, or 4 teams up, 4 teams down as we have in the lower leagues. This was 2 teams that got promoted, and Swindon went up with Luton Town.
So Swindon, a glorious victory for them. They win the League Cup. Now, they should, by rights, of course, be in European competition. Having done that, it's not that there's an Oxford fan in charge who decides that Swindon just aren't allowed in Europe. There was a different approach. Why aren't they in Europe?
The League Cup winners at that particular moment in the English league system have a place secured in what was called the Intercities Fairs Cup. That finished in 1971 and was replaced by the UEFA Cup. So a cup competition for runners-up and some cup winners, as we have, because at this particular point in Europe, we had the Cup Winners' Cup. However, UEFA didn't want the glory of their European tournaments to be tarnished with anything that didn't fit the profile of top-level football. Swindon were a lower-tier team, and lower-tier teams were not allowed to participate. And just a couple of years before this, QPR fell foul of this particular rule in UEFA. So QPR is a 3rd division team. There's a theme here. You can go right back to 1962 when Rochdale, a 4th division team, got to the final and played Norwich, a 2nd division team, in the final. We can come back to that if you want. And there's another link to a 4th division team that we can come back to. But on the focus of QPR, they weren't able to qualify for Europe because they were ineligible, because they were a lower tier team. So the league at this point wanted to do something to compensate Swindon because they were denied European football. So they set up this game with AS Roma of Italy, who were the Coppa Italia champions. They played a one-off tie over 2 legs, home and away, to decide the winners of the Anglo-Italian League Cup. And Swindon Town of the 3rd tier beat the mighty AS Roma 5-2 over aggregate and won the first Anglo-Italian League Cup. Now, the success of that, the Italians in the English FA could see that there was some commercial opportunities, as we always see with these stories in football. There are always people that spot the commercial opportunities. They then immediately set up what was called the Anglo-Italian Cup.
And Swindon entered that the following season as well. And I think there are 6 English sides and 6 Italian sides, and unbelievably, Swindon win it again.
Yeah, it's a new system. So when they won the Anglo-Italian League Cup, it was just a tie with Roma. The new format is absolutely that: 6 Italian teams, 6 English teams, and the Italian teams are pretty tasty. The Italian, have you seen the list? It's pretty tasty team.
Yes, yeah.
You've got Napoli, UK, Roma.
It's highly impressive, and the circumstances under which Swindon end up. I mean, they beat Napoli in the final in 1970. They're winning 3-0 only for that game to actually have been abandoned because the Napoli fans can't quite believe what they're seeing in front of them, and that's all a bit messy. But it's extraordinary, as you say. I think the English sides in that tournament. I think Southern Middlesbrough and so forth are not quite of the same caliber as Napoli and Juventus, and I mean, really bizarre. Just coming back to QPR West Cup final appearance in 1967, where they play West Brom, and I think they come back from 2-0 down to win 3-2. Among the goal scorers, and very possibly the guy who got the winner, I think, for QPR was Rodney Marsh. Now, the bit I just couldn't really get my head around is what Rodney Marsh was doing playing in the 3rd tier of English football. I mean, it is quite extraordinary that as to quite how QPR were. I mean, they were just. I think signings were much more not obscure. I think there was much less hierarchy in terms of signings back in those days. It came across as when we talked about the great Nottingham Forest side. Brian Clough was able to buy players like John McGovern and Ian Bowyer and players who had won the championship with Derby County like 3 years before, and then they're back in the second tier. It's really odd.
This is an era of football, English football in particular, where you did have big established teams, but you didn't have the dominance. So we're now really used to the domination of the big teams. We're seeing it with Manchester City right now. We've been through it with Chelsea and Manchester United and Arsenal and Liverpool before that. So over the last 40 years, we've become accustomed to one or two teams dominating. But this time, I think this period in English football, there wasn't really, you had the big teams, but there wasn't any real dominating teams in 1960, 67 when Rodney Marshall had been playing for QPR. So maybe, I don't know, I'm just kind of like trying to think it through. It's a good question, Graham, but maybe it was you could move freely and salaries were pretty much the same as well because salary caps were in play at that particular moment. Kind of footballers have only just kind of broken free of the minimum wage as it was, player rights. So, yeah, I mean, maybe it's a period where players were able to move for more money, even if they were going down the lower leagues.
Jeremy, you've kept me talking about Swindon Town for half an hour longer than I would ever normally do. We should probably get to thinking about ranking where this team sits in its place of football, and I will, of course, be adopting a entirely neutral and putting my petty feelings behind. But it's probably fairest for you to start on this one. How do you rank this Swindon team?
Before I get into that, because I think it's important that we try to lengthen this particular one out as long as we possibly can. I think just going back to the Anglo-Italian Cup, you mentioned about the Napoli game. A couple of things that are quite interesting. So the Anglo-Italian Cup, I didn't mention previously, when they were set up and you had your 6 Italian teams and your 6 English teams, the system they adopted was brilliant. It was 2 points for a win, 1 point for a draw. Sounds pretty normal, right? 1 point for every goal you scored as well.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Did this result in free scoring football games?
Not really, but Swindon Town won their English group by the virtue of 1 point, which was the additional goal that they'd scored. So they had scored more goals than I think it was Middlesbrough. They had scored 7 to Middlesbrough's 6 and Wolverhampton 6, actually, which meant that Swindon Town were able to top the group. So, because we talked about New York Cosmos and the NASL when they had adopted the same rule and New York Cosmos were winning the NASL, playing 30 games and acquiring about 220 points because every goal after 3 counted as a point, incredibly, or something like that. And you're right. So the game was abandoned at 3-0. Swindon winning 3-0 in the San Paolo, which has been recently renamed to the Diego Armando Maradona Stadium. And the fans were a bit disgruntled. But I think, sadly, what we're seeing here is the birth of football hooliganism as well. This is quite right. This is the starting place of when people are rising against the establishment and using football as the gear stick in order to kind of funnel their frustrations. And because it wasn't just this particular game. If you look at the history of the Anglo-Italian Cup, I mean, it's just how it went on for how long it did, which is only about 5 or 6 years in the first edition, and it came back in the 90s as well. It's quite incredible because it was just marked with violence every single edition. But that's not the question you asked me. You're asking me where do we rank Swindon Town 1968 to probably 1970 on this particular version. I think it's an incredible achievement for a lower tier team, even when the big football teams weren't in the dominant shape that they are now, to not only make a final, but to win a final and win a final against a very good Arsenal team, albeit suffering from a cold. The approach from the manager, Danny Williams, is fantastic. The performance from goalkeeper Peter Downsborough is probably the best game of his life. And it results in a legacy of setting up a brand new competition, relationships between England and Italy are resumed on the football pitch and we have this new competition, and Swindon go on and win the first two versions of that, beating Roma and Napoli. That's a story in its own right. It's quite an incredible achievement. They also get promotion in that same season to League 2. League 1, isn't it? And Division 2. Oh, God, Tier 2. These leagues, I've really got my head around it. Tier 2. So
Tier
what
2.
would be the Championship now? They get promoted into that, and they stay there for a few years as well. I think, I'm almost thinking where you're going with this. So I can kind of balance it out. I think I am going to rate this particular Swindon Town true greats.
Absolutely outrageous.
I'm taking the mick, Graham. I'm going touch of greatness. Touch of greatness.
Touch of greatness. I think with Swindon, I suppose there isn't much legacy. That's one thing I would say. Although I suppose you could. Can you say there's no legacy when a man goes on to play 889 games of football for the same club? That is possible. That is the ultimate legacy. The most games ever played in the English Football League. There's not much legacy, but I do think the way they win it is quite, begrudgingly have to concede, that is quite impressive. To go into it, having had that dream robbed, to 3-4 minutes to go and get stronger and do it in extremity, even regardless of whether that flu epidemic or that flu bug had how much of an impact that might have had. So I think that's quite impressive. Plus, I would obviously be tempted to put them down as blinker greats, or even without them we would be where we are. But I'm also acutely aware that at a future podcast we might touch upon another great side whose maybe only glorious moment in football was to win the League Cup and not much else and not much other legacy. So maybe I'd go true greats as well on the off chance. I'm not a touch of great. I don't. Can you touch a great? I think it's edge of greatness, isn't it?
I think for Swindon Town, they've gone beyond the edge, and they've achieved something that they've never achieved before. 10 years later, in 1979, they played Arsenal in the League Cup again I think it was a quarter-final, and they repeated defeat. They beat them. So, that kind of could tap into the legacy, different set of players, different times. But so I think, I kind of get where you are with edge of greatness, but I think there's something a bit special about this in terms of it's a team that's never achieved anything of this note. And they've also won international football on their first two attempts against pretty big Italian teams. And they're responsible for the creation not only of a new competition, but the breakup of the Fairs Cup disperses, the UEFA Cup comes into play, the rule-in for lower division teams is abolished. So they've achieved something there. And quite coincidentally, do you know who the holders are of the Intercities Fairs Cup? 1971 was the last time it's played. Do you know who the current holders are, Graham?
It's not Sunderland, is it?
It's not Sunderland. They did actually play in the Anglo-Italian Cup as well, but it's not Sunderland. No, it's Don Reevy's Leeds United are the current holders of the Intercities Fairs Cup. So that's something for them to shout out.
Oh, Intercity Fairs. Sorry, I was getting Intercity Fairs and Anglo-Italian mixed up. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Mistake.
That does make more sense. Yes. So, I have to concede that you are arguably a bit more independent on this one than me.
Sorry, Graham. I have one more thing for you that may help, because I think it's only right that we keep the consistency, that you have the final say on these things. That's the precedent that we set, and I think you should keep that. So I'm sticking firm with touch of greatness, and I'm not going to waver into the edge of greatness of where you are. But when we're talking about their legacy, Swindon Town, you already mentioned at the top of this, because of the nature of the League Cup, Division 1 and Division 2 teams got a bye in the first round. In the 69-70 season, when Swindon Town were holders, they also got a bye. They went to the second round where they beat Swansea City. They then went to the third round, and their defence of that trophy ended. And do you know which team ended their defence, Graham?
Oh, is that the mighty Oxford?
That is the mighty Oxford United. They beat Swindon Town, and the League Cup was no longer Swindon's.
Perfect. I'll take that. I think I can live with this. And of course, I'm safe in the knowledge that when we do our end of season promotion and relegation, there's one team I might be looking to change. But until that time, Swindon Town, 1968, 68-70, League Cup winners. Touch of greatness. So that's all we got time for this week. Thank you, Jamie, for all your time and help on this week's pod. We will be back. As a quick reminder, do subscribe to the podcast to get a new episode every Thursday. Please like the podcast. Please review the podcast. As high rating as you'd like. Obviously, you can listen to all the podcasts. You can find that via our website at chewingthewildrover.com. And you can get in touch with us via our socials at probably Twitter is the best place to get us. And that is at Couch Pandito and at Said and Done. And we'll be back with another great team next time.